Ever wonder how we actually figure out how well a country's economy is doing? It's, it's pretty complex. But today, we're going to break down a really crucial and kind of tricky part of getting that number right. We're talking about the double counting dilemma. Yeah, it really all boils down to this one huge question. How rich is a country really? I mean, you see those headlines all the time, comparing different economies, right? But what are they actually measuring? Well, the official answer is a little something called national income. You can just think of it as the grand total, the ultimate economic report card. It's supposed to tell us the value of absolutely everything a country produced in a single year. Okay, so you'd think measuring this would be pretty straightforward, but, and this is a big but, there's this hidden trap in the math. A trap that can make a country's economy look way, way bigger than it actually is.
I mean, the obvious way to do it, right? You just add up the price of every single thing sold. A car, a coffee, a computer chip, just toss it all in a pile and add it up. Seems totally logical.
But that super simple approach, it leads us straight into a mess called the double counting trap. And this is a massive problem, one that economists absolutely had to solve to get anything close to an accurate picture of the economy. So to really get our heads around this trap, let's follow the journey of something simple, like a loaf of bread. Okay, so it starts with a farmer, right? They grow and sell some wheat. Then a miller comes along, buys that wheat, grinds it into flour, and sells the flour. And finally, a baker buys that flour, bakes the bread, and sells the finished loaf to, you or me. All right, let's put some real numbers to this to see how it works. Let's say the farmer sells the wheat for $500. The miller then sells the flour for $700. And finally, the baker sells that beautiful loaf of bread for $1,000. Okay, so we've got three separate sales here. So, if we're following our first idea, just add up every sale, the total value created here would be 500 plus 700 plus 1,000, which gets us to $2,200. That's the right answer, isn't it? Nope, not even close. That is completely wrong. What we just did is fall right into the double counting trap. So what is double counting? Well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's the mistake of counting the value of these intermediate goods more than once. Just think about it for a second. That $700 price for the flour, it already includes the $500 cost of the wheat. And that $1,000 price for the bread, it already includes the $700 cost of the flour. So by adding them all up, we've actually counted the wheat's value 3 times and the flour's value twice. It's totally inflated. So, okay, how do we get the real number? Well, this is where economists got pretty clever. They developed 2 great methods to avoid this trap completely. First up is the final goods method, which is super, super simple. You just count the price of the final product sold to the person who's actually going to use it. That's it. The second one is the value added method. And with this one, you calculate the new value created at each stage of production and then add all those little pieces together. Okay, let's look at the value added method in action. The farmer, right, they start with basically nothing, seeds and soil, and create $500 of value. Cool. Now the miller buys that $500 of wheat and turns it into $700 of flour. They've added $200 of new value. Then the baker takes that $700 of flour and makes a $1,000 loaf of bread, adding another $300 of value. So now, when you add up only the value added at each step, the 500 plus the 200 plus the 300, you get the real total, $1,000. See how that works? And what's really cool is the final goods method gets us to the same place, but it's even simpler. We just totally ignore the intermediate sales, the wheat, the flour, and we only count the final sale to the customer. And the price of that final loaf? $1,000. Look at that. We get the exact same number, 2 totally different ways of looking at it, but one correct answer. All right, so that $1,000 we just figured out, that's actually the foundation for all those big economic terms you hear on the news. So let's go meet the GDP family. You see, the total value of all these final goods and services produced in an economy, that number we worked so hard to calculate correctly, that has a name. It's known as the gross domestic product, or what everyone just calls GDP. It represents the total income flowing through the entire economy. So let's get the formal definition down. GDP is the total value of all final goods and services, so no double counting, produced within a country's borders in a specific time period, usually a year. The 2 key words to remember here are final and within a country's borders.
And that brings us to a really important difference between GDP and its close cousin, GNP. GDP is all about geography. It's what's produced inside a country's borders, and it doesn't matter who produces it. GNP, on the other hand, is all about citizenship. It measures what's produced by a country's citizens, no matter where they are in the world. But wait, there's one more layer to this. Because in the real world, stuff wears out, right? The machines in the bakery get old, trucks break down, computers get slow. This is called depreciation, and you can think of it as the economy's maintenance cost. The formula here is actually really simple. If you take the gross number, like GDP, and you subtract the value that was lost to depreciation, you get the net number. So gross domestic product minus depreciation gives us net domestic product, or NDP. And some people argue that NDP is actually a more realistic measure of a country's economic output. Okay, so we've cracked the code on double counting, and we've met the whole GDP family. But why does any of this actually matter? I mean, why go to all this trouble? Well, it matters a whole lot because these numbers are basically the vital signs for a country. They help us gauge the overall health of the economy. They let us compare how we're doing against other nations, and they help governments make huge decisions on things like taxes and spending. And really, at the end of the day, they help us understand if our collective standard of living is going up or down. So, we'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. We figured out how to calculate the price of everything that's produced. But does GDP really capture the value of everything that truly matters? That's something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.